Today we're going to be doing just a little bit of rebel canning, not too off of the mark where you might go, oh, I don't know if I feel safe eating it. We're going to switch proteins, we're going to switch spices, but we're all going to do it in a safe way. And come along and let's can up some white chicken chili. It'll give you experience canning dry beans. It'll give you experience canning meat, and it'll give you experience canning a meal in a jar so that you can serve it to your family when you don't have a whole lot of time and still get them some really good nutrition. All right. Let's work on changing a recipe to a canning recipe. First of all, you need to make sure that you have everything that you need in the original recipe, and this is the recipe for white chicken chili that my friend gave me. But we're going to be changing it for a canning recipe, so a number of things are going to be changing. The chicken breast, instead of sauteing it and all that, we're going to be leaving it raw. Pardon me. We're also going to be doubling this, because I have a large family and I want to can enough that it's worth it for me. So instead of one onion, I'll be getting two. We're going to leave the vegetable oil out. We're going to leave the vegetable oil out because you don't want any unnecessary fat in your canning. This calls for 2 pint cans of Great Northern beans, but we're going to be using raw, so we need to consider that in our adjusting. It calls for a pint of chicken broth. If you have chicken broth, great. If you don't, we can add some bouillon. Whatever you want to do is fine with that. I do not have green chilies, but I have jalapenos, so I will be using those. I chose to switch my mushrooms for corn. Mushrooms are totally cannibal. You just have to do it for the right amount of time. You see all these different spices, and they're in a small dosage, or I don't know, measurement. A teaspoon of cumin is kind of hard to split between multiple jars, so instead we'll be blending these together. Oh, come here. What do you need? Oh, no. You can go watch the movie or do something else. Okay. A teaspoon of cumin is kind of hard to split between, 8 or 10 jars. So instead we'll be making a spice blend and then scooping equal parts out into the jars. And the last bit is that the sour cream and heavy cream will be left out until it is serving time. In the original recipe, that's how they do it too. They cook everything together, and then right before it's served, they stir in the sour cream and the heavy cream. So it makes it safer for canning, easier for canning, more presentable for canning, because if you do can dairy, it kind of clumps and gets kind of not so great. So let's work on getting our canning recipe ready. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double and combine all of the spices. So I'll pause it and bring you back when I've got that written down. All right, I've gotten my garlic powder that they have listed up here, as well as all my spices from down here, doubled and put together. I made a note that I may want a little bit more salt than they call for, because when you're using store canned foods, such as the Great Northern beans, the chicken broth, the green chilies, the mushrooms, they're going to have salt added to them already. So you're going to want, since it's not in your foods that you're going to be using, you're going to want to add just a little bit more salt. So now what we're going to do is decide, this is where canning recipes, in my opinion, are a little bit different. It doesn't exactly tell you how much of something that you're going to need, unless you've done it a few times and you can really measure it out perfectly that way. It's going to go, since we have beans in this, we're going to find, it says 2 cans of Great Northern beans. So we're going to say, okay, well, this would make about 5 pints. So we want the beans to consist of about half of the meal. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting a jar, and I'll go ahead and get just a random jar down so I can kind of show you. Beans will expand. So if you are canning just beans, you don't want to do anything over half of dry beans and then up to about 1.5 inches headspace with water or salt or broth or whatever. Because this has other ingredients, what we're going to do is we're going to fill it a quarter full. This being a quart, it would be 1 cup of beans per quart. If it's a pint, then it's going to be a half a cup of beans. So instead of writing an actual measurement, what we do is we write jar 1/4 full of Great Northern beans. So I'll do that and bring you right back. And note that I wrote dry so that if I forget later, then I can say, oh yeah, that's right, I'm doing this dry. Now, same with the chicken breast. So a pint is a pound whole world around. So this constitutes about 1/5 of the recipe. So what we want to do is do it about 1/5 of our jar, or you could kind of even it out to about 1/4. So that means up to halfway is going to be chicken breast cut up into nice bite-sized pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 1/4 of a jar raw diced chicken breast. All right, I'll bring you right back. Now we've gotten to the point where we're going to be dealing with the little extras that go into the chili. Onion and the green chilies, or in my case jalapenos, and the mushrooms, but in my case corn. So what I'm going to be doing is just kind of estimating about how much I want of that. Honestly, it'll probably end up being about a tablespoon or 2 of corn and about a tablespoon of raw diced jalapeno. And then I'm going to use 2 onions for this whole recipe. So then I will just kind of put it in all the jars that I can. I'm going to assume that I'm going to get about 10 pints out of this. So you could start with a couple of tablespoons of onion. So for the recipe, I will write 2 tablespoons of onion per jar and 1 tablespoon of peppers per jar and 2 tablespoons of corn per jar. I'll bring you right back. All right, I've got it all written down. The last parts that are written down, of course, besides the sour cream and heavy cream, because we're not going to be including that in our canning recipe, are the chicken broth, which you can use chicken broth, or you can use water for this, or if you have bouillon, you can make your own like chicken broth with bouillon. So basically what we're going to be doing is, after we've gotten it all packed in, we're just going to be filling it to 1.5 inches of headspace with liquid. So I will write that down and bring you right back. Okay, so the way that we will actually assemble this is we'll start here. We'll do 1/4 full of dry beans, 1/4 jar of raw diced chicken breast. Then we'll do 2 tablespoons of onion. Really? Oh. Okay, just a minute. 2 tablespoons of diced onion per jar, a tablespoon of diced hot pepper, 2 tablespoons of corn, and then you're going to put your spice mix on top, distribute it evenly amongst the jars, and fill it to 1.5 inch headspace with liquid, either broth or water. Now, after you've gotten your recipe written down as to the amounts and how you're going to put it together, we need to know what the proper canning time is for recipes that you're changing and doing a little bit of rebel canning with. Now, chances are you're going to find something really similar already in print and already approved. So that's what I like to do, is I like to find things that are almost exactly the same and go off of that. But you absolutely want to find the thing that's in your meal, and all the ingredients that are in your meal, and find the thing in it that cans for the longest period of time. For example, if you're doing a soup with just a little bit of meat and you're like, oh, it's only a little bit of meat, I can totally can it for a vegetable time. No, can it for the meat times. It's not going to hurt anything, and it's only going to help you to have safer food. So what I like to do is I like to get my old trusty Ball Blue book, because still good stuff, even if they're a little bit rigid. And I like to find things that are very similar, and I'll see if I can get it close enough that the light actually shows it. So this one is for poultry, and since I'm going to be doing quarts, I look down here and I've already underlined it. Hour and a half for quarts under 10 pounds pressure for my altitude. If I turn the page, then I can find bean soup, which is also like a bean soup, and it's also an hour and a half for quarts. And if I turn the page again and I find a regular standard chili, it's also an hour and a half for quarts. That tells me that I am pretty much safe doing 90 minutes for my quarts of white chicken chili. The only thing that really takes longer than an hour and a half to can is seafood. So if you're doing anything with seafood, make sure you double check it with a trusted source to see how long it ought to be canned, because it does have slightly higher risk of contamination, so you want to be a little extra sure on that. So I will be doing my quarts for 90 minutes. If I was doing this in pints, I could do it for 75 minutes. My family eats a huge amount. We have 7 people in our family, and unless it's a something that we're not going to use a whole lot of at one meal, quarts are really my best way to go. So now that you've seen all of that, let's get going on actually putting it together. I'm going to start by rinsing off my beans. Beans are an agricultural product, so that means they might have a little bit of dust and stuff on them, and you don't want to have any bad beans or anything like that in there, so let's rinse off some beans first. I was trying not to spill any, but a few. That'll be fine. Alright, I've got some rinsed beans. And I'm going to set these aside and get the other things ready so that we can just put all the jars together quickly without having to go back and forth too much. Next thing I'm going to do is dice up some chicken breast, and I'm pretty sure y'all know how to dice up chicken breast, so I'm not going to videotape that because I would just waste a lot of time that I like to fill with talking instead. In addition to chopping up the chicken, I'm also chopping up my onions and jalapenos. I'm wearing a glove because I don't like spicy things in my hands. And I'm also going to get the corn out of the freezer because I just bought a package of frozen corn for this recipe. Alright, we're going to start making our spice blend real quick. And I'm going to start with oregano since this is from my garden and I need to kind of crush it in order to get it in there. And I've got a 1-year-old in my arms, so she's going to be helping me a little bit. Not really, but she's going to be inspiring me to do this all one-handed. Mama? Okay, that'll be enough oregano. It calls for 2 teaspoons, but I don't quite have enough. You could substitute some Italian seasoning in there if you'd like, but I think it'll be enough for what I'm making. Oregano is great, but it's chili. It's a little bit more southwestern and a little less Italian. All right. The next thing that we're going to do is some garlic powder. It says 3 teaspoons of garlic powder. 1, 2, 3. And then let's get some salt. And again, I'm holding a baby, so it's going to be a little bit tricky here. Teaspoon of salt, but remember I said that a little bit more will help because we don't have any added salt. So about 1.5 teaspoons is probably where I'm going to go with that. Let's get some cumin. It says 2 teaspoons of cumin. 1, 2. Let's see, we got the oregano already. A teaspoon of pepper. I buy it in giant containers, so over here I'll get a teaspoon of pepper. And then it says cayenne pepper, but I do not have cayenne pepper. I have chili powder, so we'll be using that instead. So about 1/2 teaspoon. This will change the color to be not quite so white, but it's still pretty good. So let's mix it up. Now I will mention that oftentimes in store-bought canned chilies and things like that, you're going to find that there's a little bit of sugar added. If you like that kind of like sweet note to a chili, go ahead and add a teaspoon of sugar in here. I don't like it, but some people really do. So if you like that, you can go ahead and add a teaspoon of sugar. I'm not going to. All right, let's get packing our jars. One last thing I'm going to go ahead and do, since the original calls for chicken broth, and I'm fresh out of chicken broth. I'm going to be using this chicken bouillon that I have, and I'm just going to go ahead and mix it right into my spices so that when I add the liquid, it's already mixed in. So I'm just going to add a couple teaspoons, maybe about 3 teaspoons, because 1 teaspoon makes about a cup of liquid. So I should spread it out. So we'll mix it in, and now we're going to start packing in our jars. I'll do it a little bit from this perspective, and then I'll bring you closer so you can see it better. This is a canning funnel. If you're not familiar with it, it helps to keep the rims of your jars a little bit cleaner. It's not a foolproof way, but it does certainly help. The jars are room temperature, they're not heated or anything. You don't need to worry about that. This is a 3/4 cup measure because I'm not sure if a 1 cup measure would be a little too much, because remember, we want to fill it about 1/4 of the way. That's pretty close. I might do a little tiny bit more. There we go. All right, so that's about 1/4 of a way. That's all we really want to do with the completely unsoaked, uncooked beans, because they are going to swell. Okay, when you make this at first, it's going to look more like soup and less like a chili, because they're going to be cooking in the pressure canner, and you don't want that to swell so much that it explodes out of the top. All right, the next thing is going to be up to the halfway point. We're going to put some diced chicken. I'm going to be washing all of this when I'm done, so I don't need to worry about whether I'm cross-contaminating or not, because it's all going to get cooked. Okay? Is that about half? Yep, just about half. All right. The next thing that we're going to be doing is putting some onion and pepper and spices in there and corn. I'll just rinse my hands because even though I'm not worried about cross-contamination, I still don't like the stickiness of the chicken breast juices on me. All right. About 2 tablespoons of onion. 2 heaping tablespoons of onion, maybe a little bit more. You can measure this with your heart. And then about a tablespoon of the whatever pepper you have. I have jalapenos. If you have the canned diced chilies, that's perfect too. About 2 tablespoons of corn. This is a 1/3 cup, but it's only about halfway full. And then I'm making about 7 quarts, so I figure I can put a nice heaping teaspoonful of the spices in there. And I'm just going to fill the rest with water to about 1.5 inches of head space. There we go. And this one's ready for me to put a lid on and set aside. All right, just in case anything got on any of these rims, and I know that it did, I'm going to use a little damp paper towel and just wipe them off a little bit before I put my lids and rings on. If this is your first time canning, you can go back and watch a couple of my videos if you would like, but I'll give you the rundown here. You either want to use brand new lids, or if you're like me, what you're going to want to do is look at the lids that you have used before, and you're going to want to make sure that they are in very good condition. So the rubber is still supple feeling, not dry. It isn't indented too much or too hard. It still flexes, and it does. There's no nicks or bends or rust around the edges, and everything looks nice. There's no nicks on the coated part because you don't want rust. Okay, and make sure it's completely clean as well. If you have something like this is from Tomato Sauce. It's clean, it's supple, everything is good. There's no bends, no rust. I will use this one too. So I'm going to go ahead and put my lids on. They are not heated. They don't need to be heated anymore. Your canner will do that for you. Just make sure it's nice and centered. If you have it off to the edge too much, then it's not going to seal. Make sure it's centered, and get your ring. I have a whole stash of them up that way. And in order to keep it centered, what I like to do is like this. And then you're going to spin it till it stops, and then just about 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch more. And that's as tight as you want it. So I'll speed up the rest of this then. I've talked about setting up a pressure canner in the past, but just in case you haven't done it yet and haven't seen the other videos, I'll do a quick rundown. A pressure canner comes in lots of different sizes, but it has some basic components. The canning pot itself, a rack. If you are missing your rack, you can use the bands from canning and just lay them flat on there and balance them. The smaller ones are easier than the larger ones here, but yeah. So canning rack goes in the bottom, and then the lid. There are different kinds of lids. Some canners don't use a gasket, but most do. This is a Presto. It uses a dial gauge. Some use a weighted gauge. I have 2 canners that use a weighted gauge, and they work pretty much the same way, just that this is easier to visualize, and the weighted gauge is more of a little trickier to understand how the rocking goes. Inside the lid, you need to have the proper gasket that fits it, and it needs to be supple, not cracked. I've got kids in the other room. Not cracked or anything like that. And this is the weight that goes on top after it has vented. All right. This is a 22, 23 quart? Can't remember. Close enough. And it requires 3 quarts of water in the bottom. Get your water the same temperature-ish as, no need to break out the thermometer. Just if you've got cold food, put in cold water. If you've got hot food, put in hot water. All right. 3 quarts of water in the bottom in order to get pressure, the right pressure. We've got all 3 quarts just kind of lined up here. Normally I'd just do it one at a time. A lot of canners also have a line inside that if it's empty and you fill it to that line, then that's the right amount of water. All right. So now I've got my rack and I've got my water in there, and I'm going to start putting my jars in there, and I'm going to very awkwardly just grab this tripod and show you how I do that. So hopefully it's not terrible. So you just want to arrange them nicely. Mine will end up looking kind of like a flower. I'll grab a few more and then I'll show you. Mine fits 7 quarts in it. I have found that sometimes if a quart jar is a little bit of an odd size, it makes it a little bit harder to fit it in there, but normally it's pretty simple. All right, now we're just gonna get the lid on. One-handed is a little bit difficult, but it works. Twist it on so that it meets up both sides. And then we're going to turn on the heat. There you go. I'll turn on the heat. I go pretty high. I don't go up to my highest because this is a this burner has a feature that makes it boil rapidly. It brings it up to temperature really fast, which is nice, but it's also kind of not nice for canning because you want it to get up to temperature quickly enough that you're not wasting your day. But if it gets up to temperature too fast, you can have what is called siphoning, where the liquid in the jar rushes out of the jar into the canning water. It does not affect the quality of your food, but it can affect the quality of the seal. If there's any fat in there that gets in between the rubber seal and the glass jar. And it can become annoying because then you have less liquid and you have to add more liquid when you cook it, etc. Plus then it makes all the water dirty and outside the jar is extra dirty. So if you can raise it up to temperature at kind of a medium speed, that's better. So I start mine at about an 8, and I'll bring it back when it's at the next step. Basically it's just going to heat up and start to steam out of this little vent. Do not cover it yet. You want that steam to come out of that vent, and it needs to be steaming for 10 minutes. So I'll bring it back once it starts to steam, and I'll show you what we do next. Okay, so it's hard to tell because this is also steaming, but I have a steady stream of steam coming from here. And so I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes. Don't worry about that. It's fine. It's just because it's boiling very rapidly, and eventually this little plug will pop up and close that off, and the pressure will start to build. But we have to vent it for 10 minutes, so let's set the timer for 10 minutes. And I'll bring it back. Oh, I'll help you. Hold on. I'll bring it back after it's vented for 10 minutes. All right, it's been almost 10 minutes. You'll hear the timer in just a minute. Just a minute. help you. Hold on. I'll come get you. You can see I've got lunch over here. And as soon as that timer goes off, what we're going to do is we're going to stick this little guy on top and turn the heat down to a more sustainable temperature. There we go. So we're going to turn it down. I turn mine down to about a 4 on my burner. Everyone's going to be a little bit different, but otherwise it builds pressure too quickly and too high. So what we're going to be doing is waiting until my pressure comes in at 11. So there's a gauge that I'll get you a little closer. You can see the 10 and then there's a little mark. Technically speaking, up here we go to 11 pounds. So once it gets to 11 pounds, I keep it there. It's okay, baby. And then what you need to do is make sure that it stays between above 11 pounds for the entire processing time, which is 90 minutes. So I'll bring you back when it gets up to 11 pounds or a little above that. All right, I'm back. The pressure is up close to 15, which is fine. As long as it stays between 11 and 15, I'm not worried about it. If it gets to about 15, this actually starts to rock a little bit. And so if I'm in the other room, I can hear it and I can go, oh, I need to turn my heat down just a little bit. But as long as it's between about 11 and 15, that's the pressure that I need to be canning at. It got up this high because I was rocking my baby to sleep and needed to focus on that. And I knew that this would be fine. So we're going to go ahead and start our 90 minutes now that I know for sure it's at the right pressure. So I've got my timer up here, 90 minutes. And then at 90 minutes, what we'll do is we'll turn off the heat and we'll move this off of the burner to help it to cool down. But we will not lift this off. We will not attempt to take the lid off. We will not douse it in cold water. We will not be pushing this down or anything. We'll let it cool down naturally. I'd also like to introduce you to my lovely 1981 Miro-Matic that I just got a new gasket for. And it's a little bit different. This is a jiggler style, and it doesn't have a gauge on the top, and the weight is different, and the safety feature on my Presto, that's this little button over here, is not in that place. Here, what happens is in one of these handles, it pops up. So, my 8-year-old is baking bread over there too. Anyway, I wanted to show you that what we're going to do with this one, I'm canning some beans in here. We're going to vent this for 10 minutes, and it's got a steady stream of steam. It's hard to see on the video, but I promise it is there. So in 10 minutes, what we'll be doing is putting the weight on. And this is the weight. So it has marks for 5, 10, and 15 pounds. And since I can at 10 pounds, I'll be putting this on top of that. And when it gets to temperature and pressure, it'll start to kind of jiggle. Kind of like one of those awkward sprinklers that... Alright, so that's how you operate this. And just for funsies, I'll bring you back when it's jiggling so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so this canner is done. It's been 90 minutes and I'm ready. Here's an opportunity. This is what it looks like when my other canner has reached pressure. So you want it to rattle around like that about 4 times a minute or so. And I'll double check that to make sure I'm giving you perfectly accurate information, but that's what you want it to look like. Alright, so this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the burner and move it very gently back off the burner a little bit so that the pressure can come down naturally. Alright, let's do that. That's all the farther I can get it off that burner because it's such a big canner. And yeah, now I've got my beans going over here. And that's perfect for 10 pounds of pressure. So I went ahead and started my timer for my beans, which is also 75 minutes because I'm doing pints. All right, I'll bring you back at the next step. All right, so my pressure has come down completely and my little button is down. I can take this off. All right, and then what I'm gonna do is open the lid, but then I'm just gonna leave it cracked a little bit. Being careful not to open the steam toward you. And let the condensation run down. So I'm going to let mine stay open a little bit like that for probably about 5 minutes or so. And you've probably noticed that this is done also, but it is coming down in pressure. So that one's, you've got to wait for a little bit. So this one is just going to cool a little bit before I come and get the jars out. You can hear them already starting to ping and seal in there. All right, big reveal. It's been a few minutes. Just gonna take this off. And I have some bread rising here, so I'm gonna kind of prop it against the bread because a little bit of heat is kind of helpful. All right, my kids needed me, so let's start pulling these out. Ta-da! I'm putting them on a towel here. And then I have these that I'm going to drape over the top of them to kind of keep the heat in them so that they don't siphon. Putting them kind of close together also helps them to maintain their heat and reduce the heat slowly. Now, the way that you'll make this is that you'll just open a jar and add a little sour cream and heavy cream. Heat it up and serve it that way. So we'll cover them loosely like that so that they can start to cool at a slower speed. All right, now I've got to tend to this one. Yeah. Now, how can you tell whether this one is released since it doesn't have a little guy to pop down and it doesn't have a gauge? Well, I'm going to show you. You can tap it. There you go. You tap it gently, and if a little bit of steam hisses out, then it's still pressurized and you need to let it come down longer. There is our lovely white chicken chili. You canned meat and beans, and you've made meals for your family. Did a good job. Good job working your pressure canner, and congrats. One more skill in your belt. Thanks for coming along with me and making white chicken chili. Our canning recipe turned out really well. I'm not going to make you wait for this video until I open it and try it because I want to get this video out as soon as I can so that people who want to learn this can get it going right now. But these are going to seal over the next 12 to 24 hours and probably a lot sooner. But you want to wait at least 12 hours before you jostle these around too much. And certainly before you remove the rings, which are the screw band of it. You should hear them all ping down if you don't hear them, but they ping down without you hearing them. That's fine too. The way that you check to see if something is sealed, I'll show you on another jar of something else I have. To make sure that something is sealed, you're going to pick it up by the lid, give it a little shake, and if it doesn't come off, it's sealed. If it does come off, pitch it. If it comes off and you just canned them yesterday, throw it in the fridge or cook it for dinner that night. It's perfectly fine and safe to eat. Or you could reprocess them. But if you find it on your shelf after a few days and the lid's not on, don't eat it. All right. Thank you for coming along pressure canning with me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you all try this recipe, or if you have questions about how to adapt another recipe for canning, feel free to comment or find me on Instagram or Facebook. I love doing this kind of thing, so just give me what you want to figure out how you can can up, and I will do everything I can to help you to figure out a good canning recipe for that food. Thank you very much, and God bless you, and we'll see you tomorrow morning for my coffee in the garden recipe, coffee in the garden video. Okay, bye-bye.